COVID-19 emergency and open public meetings. This meeting is being held remotely. I have one correction to the agenda before we begin. It's a minor one. Agenda item 5, informational updates, is intended to be placed after the mayor's report for the City Council's order of business. So item 5 will be done after the mayor's report is provided. And at this point, we'll take a moment to take a roll call of the council members in attendance. Please say here when I call your name. And Councilmember Marks has an excused absence this evening. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Council President Hunt.
Here.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Here.
Thanks. And Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
That is 6 of our 7 council members this evening. The next item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I would like you to join me, but please make sure to put your microphones on mute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on our agenda this evening is audience comments. And for those of you who submitted the online form to make comments, your name will be called shortly. And for those who have joined us tonight and would like to make comments but did not sign up in advance, please raise your virtual hand. And if you are on the phone, press *3. And if you have joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon. This can vary by device, but one option may be to go to the participant panel and choose the raise hand icon in the lower right-hand corner. City Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak for general audience comments or indicated a desire to speak this evening?
Yes.
Thank you. So for those folks who are joining us tonight to make comments, please make sure to direct those comments to the whole council and not to individuals. And while this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. When you are recognized, please unmute your microphone, state your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. And please remute your microphone when you're done. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will still need to proceed, and you are encouraged to rejoin the meeting if able. Personal attacks, obscene language, and derogatory remarks and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. Resident comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process, and the city takes these comments seriously. And we thank you all for taking the time to address us this evening. City Clerk, can you please identify the first person who has signed up to speak tonight?
Yes, the first person who signed up to speak is Jennifer Fitzpatrick. At this time, I don't see the number Jennifer provided listed here. Jennifer, if you are on the call and wish to speak, if you're on the phone, please press *3 to raise your hand. And I'll monitor this list for Jennifer. After her, we have Danielle Clark signed up to speak. Let me locate Danielle's number here. Danielle, in just a moment here, you'll be unmuted. You have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Danielle Clark. I work for City of Issaquah's Public Works operations team as a hardworking, dedicated maintenance worker up until earlier today when I received my letter of termination for not complying with the vaccine policy that was mandated by our Mayor, Mary Lou Pauley. I'm currently heartbroken. This has created more turmoil, disarray, sadness, and grief for all of us. Please excuse me, this is very hard. More than you can even begin to fathom or understand, the city has and will continue to go downhill fast with these administration decisions, and my heart goes out to the ones that are forced to stay because you've pushed them so far up against a wall. They have no other option because they need to provide for their families and put food on the table. You have given us an ultimatum, not a choice, and I've learned that ultimatums in relationships are destructive, and it has shown. The city of Issaquah has already lost some of the greatest humans and coworkers I have ever come in contact with, and sadly, this loss is and will continue. I felt like a sheep at a slaughterhouse, and I knew my days there were numbered. I hope when this is all over, you don't look back and wish you did things differently. The damage has been done. Brett Heath spent 40 plus years of his life to create this amazing public works department, and it only took 2 years since he was pushed into retirement early to absolutely destroy it. None of the employees want to be there right now. There have been more issues than just COVID-related things to cause this, and it's causing an intense amount of distress to everyone at Public Works. Most of us have been here for a substantial amount of time, and we all have been excited to spend the rest of our working years for the city of Issaquah. And yet, we're being stripped from those benefits and values that were so much appreciated there. Morale is at an all-time low, and your plan of retaining employees, actually, you don't have one that was stated to us. The salmon values that we strive for and have been ripped from our fingertips by the very people and administration that created them. The foundation of trust, our integrity of having respectful, honest, transparent actions, the aspect of leading with respect has now turned to a dictatorship, understanding that there are different communication styles, supporting each other with actions, and being engaged to your employees have been completely thrown out the window. Our livelihoods are getting stepped on and spit on by the same people we plow snow, keep our roads safe, provide clean drinking water and excellent service for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have worked tirelessly through this entire pandemic, tying up our boots every day, coming into work for this city, and for you to terminate employees almost 2 years later over a vaccine that doesn't kill nor stop the spread of COVID at this point is just pouring salt on our wounds. Why are you forcing me to use an umbrella when it rains to keep you dry? It simply does not work like that. Why are you forcing me to vax up when your odds of catching COVID are still at risk regardless of my vaccination umbrella? I'm a strong and healthy person that believes in my immune system, and I'll be damned if I let someone who doesn't even know the color of my eyes or someone that can't recognize me in a public setting enforce or dictate what I put into my body. We are all entitled to our morals and beliefs. Why can't we keep it that way? Whether this goes in one ear and out the other, maybe it can help with future change or helping have a little bit more heart and human element in this matter towards your employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. City Clerk, who is up next?
The next person signed up to speak is Christy Triple. Christy, you've been unmuted.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, council members and those in attendance at the meeting this evening. That's hard to follow, and my heart goes out. I know these are difficult times and difficult decisions to make, so I wanted to acknowledge that. I'm Christy Triple with Raleigh Properties at 1595 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite 1 here in Issaquah. I'm also a resident. Council has already heard from us in writing, but I wanted to save the time to summarize, and usually I'm rushing, trying to finish my dinner and wondering if I have spinach in my teeth when I'm on video, so I thought I would call in today. We've already shared with council, but we want to share with our community as well just how much we appreciate the Issaquah Police Department and its civilian staff as well. One can never truly imagine what one faces on a daily basis until you walked a mile in their shoes. Issaquah is truly fortunate to have the feeling of safety it does, and that is due to the commitment and integrity of the IPD that they deliver day in and day out on. There are things that the IPD does on a daily basis so that our lives are better. Not so many communities are blessed as we are. In the past 3 months alone, we've met Officers Matt, Jordan, and Zach as they have assisted us in a variety of incidents, from smashed car windows, break-ins, to a drunken individual who simply refused to leave our office property despite our trying to assist them. All of the IPD officers we've worked with and staff were extremely helpful, respectful, approachable, professional, and responsive. We place a very high value on the partnership we have with the IPD to keep our community safe and prevent crime. It is not lost on us just how hard a job it can be, especially with all the scrutiny and questioning we've seen in the past couple of years. Over many decades and on many, many occasions, we've personally met and worked with most of our police officers at one time or another and witnessed firsthand the IPD in action. Issaquah would not be the special place it is without the caring officers and individuals who protect and serve our community. Issaquah Police Department, please know how grateful we are for your service. Thank you for all of us from Raleigh Properties. And thanks to the council for the thumbs up on the IPD and Human Services budget proposed for 2022. And while I'm on the line, I wanted to share a thumbs up and a big thank you for the funding sought on projects on tonight's agenda. I know many people had a hand in what's on the council docket for discussion tonight. Great agenda. These types of decisions and actions truly do make a difference. And some of those items on the agenda tonight are the micro enterprise grants for small businesses, the King County flood control grants that were received, and also Trout Unlimited's work on stormwater improvements, the submittal of a grant for the Black Nugget retaining wall, which is in need of some assistance, and the Small Business Flex Fund, and also working with HopeLink to support Issaquah's residents. So thank you for your continued support also of Visit Issaquah and the number of entities, to include the Chamber with the Salmon Days that everyone in the community shows up to help make happen, and the Visitor Information Center that all support tourism initiatives for our community. So thank you for all that you do, Council and the city, and have a great evening. Appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Christy. City Clerk, who has also signed up this evening for comments?
Yes, we do have someone else signed up to speak, and we have a number of people attending the meeting tonight. So if anyone on the phone or who's joined by computer would like to make comments and didn't sign up, please let us know. If you're on the phone, please press *3. If you've joined by computer, please raise your virtual hand. Look for the small hand icon, or you can send me, the host, a chat message. And with that, the next person signed up to speak is Shane Nicholson. Shane, in just a moment here, I'll be making you a panelist so that you can unmute, and you can also choose to turn your video on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, yeah, Shane Nicholson again. I was on the last city council meeting just discussing the, or speaking my opinion on the vaccination mandate, and tonight I also have opinions on that as well, but also I have some questions about the ratifying of the MOU for the Teamsters. Just kind of curious how that MOU can be ratified without agreement upon with the union, seeing that we're in an impasse. So it's kind of, I'm just curious about that. But also I just wanted, even though, you know, I wasn't actually terminated today, my day of slaughter is actually now December 15th, since I did do a religious exemption, and just how I feel about the vaccination mandate. I just want to to the council, you know, I really hope that you guys, in ratifying this bill, if you do, I really hope that it's like actually part of your values, and you guys are not just doing something because you think it's going to make you look good, or, you know, try to advance your political career or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, and especially now with how times are, you know, this stuff is very, very important. And you know, you have people's livelihoods in your hands. And if it's something you guys don't believe in, I really would hope that you guys would stand up and, you know, disagree. If that's, you know, whatever. I just want to make sure that I hope that you guys are really, really taking all this into consideration and the amount of people that this is affecting, and making a decision true to your heart, not something that, you know, you think is going to advance you in the future or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, my last day is December 15th because apparently my religious accommodations can't be upheld because of an undue hardship to the city, which I don't know how that works because I've been working the entire time without complaint, showing up to work every day without one complaint of the supposed dangers or
Shane, are you still with us? We're not really hearing anything right now.
and it just baffles me that all of a sudden, you know, not all of a sudden, but just putting a hard date on something of this significance can happen like this. So, but yeah, you know, I just wanted to share that. So thank you.
Thank you, Shane. City Clerk, is there anyone else that's indicated a desire to speak this evening?
Mayor, I'm just taking one last look, and I don't see anyone else that's indicated a desire to speak.
Okay, thank you. So we did have 4 people come in this evening. We had some employee comments about questions about how an impasse in negotiations can result in council ratification of an MOU, and other concerns about city staff morale and the vaccine mandate. We also had some speakers on business members supporting council funding for actions that are on your agenda this evening. So thank you everyone who came in. If there is additional information or other ways that people would like to contact their council, you can submit a comment at any time to citycouncil@issaquah.gov. And I'm going to flip it over now to Council President Hunt to see if she has any email comments to summarize on any of tonight's agenda topics.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. We do have several emails that specifically addressed items that are on our agenda this evening. And while we've been having virtual meetings, I have been summarizing emails that specifically refer to agenda bills on our agendas. For this evening, we had 3 emails that addressed AB 8258, the MOU or Memorandum of Understanding for Teamsters 763. And in these emails, there were asks to have options for testing, concerns about the vaccine mandate, and also expressing concerns regarding the effects on public works of the city. Then we have an email from a resident that expressed comments and questions on multiple items that are on our agendas this evening. On AB 8272, regarding the ITS traffic camera upgrade, asks that we prioritize routes used by commuters or pass-through traffic. On AB 8240, Eastside Transportation Interlocal Agreement, had comments and questions. On AB 8268, wrote that this was important to keep services internal, and AB 8268, so I can have the full name. I'll come back to that. AB 7901, which is the Forest Carbon Credit Program, supported acquisition of this as critical habitat, but did not feel that this should divert funds from the park system. And then AB 8254, which is the ARPA allocation, American Rescue Plan Act funding allocation, supported rental assistance, and this resident did not support the small business flex fund assistance. That concludes comments that specifically reference items on tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. The next item of business tonight is committee and regional reports, and we will start with Councilmember Hall this evening.
Thank you very much, Mayor Polly. This is Councilmember Hall. Let me pull up my notes real quick. All right, a couple reports this evening. First, the next Wednesday, October 27th, is the next meeting of the Cascade Water Alliance Board of Directors. There's no agenda that's been set for this meeting yet that I've seen. And then next Wednesday, November 17th, is the next meeting of the Growth Management Planning Council's Affordable Housing Committee. At this meeting, we're going to consider adoption of our legislative priorities for the 2022 legislative session in Olympia. At our last meeting a few weeks ago, we were presented with draft priorities, which the city administrator shared out via email about 10 minutes ago. The committee's draft overarching priorities are: 1, to increase capital resources for affordable housing; 2, to support local jurisdictions in their planning for increasing affordable housing in their cities; and 3, to support housing stability through tenant protections and COVID-19 recovery. There are also a handful of more specific priorities that fall under each of those overarching priorities. So if you have any feedback on those priorities, I would ask that you please let me know by Wednesday, November 3rd. That's a few weeks from now. So the SCA caucus, Sound Cities Association caucus, and committee staff have time to work through amendments. And I'll also be sure to bring this up again at good of the order at our next regular city council meeting on Monday, November 1st, in case anyone on council would like to discuss further. And with that, Mayor Polly, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. On October 7th, I attended the Healthier Here Governing Board. The highlight of the meeting was a youth panel discussing how King County healthcare systems can better serve young people, especially those in marginalized and rural communities. Then on October 13th, I attended the Connect to Community Advisory Group, and this is part of the Healthier Here Governing Board. This group is focused on the technical work of developing a bilateral behavioral health communications network for King County. At the October 13th meeting, I and Modester Chata, who is a board member of the Association of Zambians in Seattle, we were elected co-chairs of the group. The agenda that day focused on 2 items, including tribal representation and incentives for involvement in the network. And then my other report is that on October 8th, I attended the Eastside Transportation Partnership. Catherine Bowman, who is a Port of Seattle Commissioner, provided an overview of the challenges faced by the port during this COVID recovery period, as well as the transportation needs of travelers trying to get to SeaTac. ETP members expressed support for better communications with Eastside cities and passengers, and better coordination between the port and Metro Sound Transit buses and Link-like rail. We also proposed that the Port of Seattle host an Eastside conference or convening to better learn about our needs related to getting to SeaTac from the east side. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. This is Councilmember Walsh. I have 3 reports. On Thursday, the 14th, I attended the King County Cities Climate Collaboration K4C elected officials work session. There we heard about the Puget Sound Regional Emissions Analysis Project, which is actually going to be really useful for us in our climate planning. It's going to provide city level geographic and consumption greenhouse gas inventories, as well as new analysis on how each of the cities can help reach our shared greenhouse gas reduction targets. And we can expect that data to arrive in mid-2022. We also heard from Representative Joe Fitzgibbon with a preview of the 2022 legislative session. There were 3 bill topics that he discussed. The first was building decarbonization, then methane reduction, and finally having a climate planning element as a required part of comprehensive plans. As a group, we also adopted the K4C state legislative interest, which we noted can also help inform our city legislative agendas. And finally, we discussed how the cities can build climate resilience using their comprehensive plans. Noted that comp plan update season is coming up, so King County asked how they could help the cities with that. And answers included providing model code, a regional preparedness inventory, and an ask for King County staff to present to city planning commissions. So that was the first. And then later that evening, also on Thursday, the 14th, Councilmember DeMichelle and I attended a community dinner on police crisis response that was attended by local elected officials, police chiefs, social workers, community members, and headlined by County Council President Claudia Balducci. We heard from three groups. First of all, Bellevue with our CARES program, which launched in 2012. That started out as a casework management program, which included 12 to 15 Masters of Social Work students from local colleges supervised by 2 full-time mental health professionals, MHPs. And it also included a newer pilot that just ended in August, which trialed integrating the MHPs with highly trained police officers for crisis response. And they didn't release the results of that pilot yet because they promised it to the Bellevue community first. But we are looking forward to hearing how that went. We also heard this time from hospitals, which included an ER doctor and a social worker, about their experience with people in mental health crisis, chemical dependency, and the unhoused. And their wish list asked for more inpatient mental health beds as well as sobering beds. And we also heard from the deputy city manager of Kirkland about a community responders program they're launching, which includes the addition of 6 MHPs and 4 new police officers with their upcoming budget. And interestingly enough, our own Beth Goldberg will be in charge of that program at Kirkland. So we wish her well. We want to hear all about it. And then finally, on Friday, the 15th, I attended the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce board meeting for their first in-person meeting since March 2020. They're meeting quarterly in person as well as the other ones online, which I thought was a great meeting of all the benefits from the pandemic, or the things we've learned, I should say. And at that meeting, I shared a few items of note to the chamber, including this meeting's discussion of the ARPA funds for the Small Business Flex Grant, also our budget thumbs up of the Police and Human Services positions, and our upcoming city legislative agenda discussion. And while we were there, Wally, our city administrator, also updated the chamber on our city's approach to employee vaccination mandates. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Goodman here. Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors met last Thursday, and the primary items on our agenda were some budget amendments, and one of those had to do with vacancies. And before the vaccine mandates, the agency had 10 vacancies, and tomorrow, it was anticipated last week that tomorrow there will be an additional 15 vacancies. So one of the adjustments was $900,000 that will be used to select, train, and spend on overtime for vacancies, and that which will impact the agency until June 22, and then the vacancies will are anticipated to be filled. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Deputy Council President Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. And Council President Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I wanted to give the full name of that one bill that I just had the AB number for under the email comments. And so that was with regards to AB 8268, which is interlocal agreement with the city of Redmond for mutual aid dispatch services. And again, that residents' emails, comments to us were summarized as that it was important to keep those services internal to the city. So just wanted to give that additional information on that. Then regarding my regional reports, King Conservation District Advisory Committee met on October 12th. We welcomed the new executive director of the King Conservation District. She is Director Rosa Mendez Perez. We also received a financial and program update, and we also discussed work on election reform, which has to do with that the election for King Conservation District for their board currently occurs at a odd time of year when there are no other elections occurring, and it results in very low turnout for these elected positions. There is a prospect that that could be taken up by the state legislature this year. It does require a state action to allow for King Conservation District to have this election concurrent with other elections, which would presumably increase participation in this election. So we are working on aligning on advocacy for that, but that may potentially be taken up by the legislature in this next session. Then the Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee met on October 14th. This is a group of city council members, and Councilmember Goodman and I were in attendance at this meeting. We are working on the Title 18, which is our municipal land use code overhaul. And in this meeting, we primarily discussed new state requirements for code around emergency shelters and indoor emergency housing. So we discussed the recommendation from the development department, and then we discussed the information that will be provided to PPC for their recommendation. So that recommendation will ultimately come back to council for discussion. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. The next item on the agenda this evening is the mayor's report. There will be an executive session this evening to review the performance of a public employee per RCW 42.30.110 per N1 per NG. And the item is expected to last 15 minutes. There is no action that is anticipated to follow in open session. Hispanic Heritage Month. Earlier this month, I issued a proclamation that recognizes and celebrates the contributions of Americans whose ancestors came from Spain, Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Spanish-speaking nations of the Caribbean. Our Hispanic Latinx community in Issaquah makes up 9% of our local population. Hispanic Heritage Month pays tribute to Hispanic heritage through education, acknowledgement, and celebration within our community. This year's theme, Esperanza, Hope, invites us to celebrate Hispanic heritage and reflect on all of the contributions Hispanics have made in the past and will continue to make in the future. I want to provide a little update on the Capital Finance Community Task Force. The Capital Finance Community Task Force has met twice, discussing topics related to public outreach, lessons learned from previous levy and bond measures, and new revenue options that would help fund the more than $78 million of unfunded infrastructure projects in the city's capital improvement plan. For this task force, I have pulled together council members, city commissioners, and board members, and other members of the public, and I have asked them to provide me with recommendations on how we should prioritize amongst our infrastructure needs and how we should consider funding those priorities. Even after only 2 meetings, I have to say I am really impressed with this group and very, very grateful for their time. The city is addressing the abandoned shopping carts that are collecting around the transit center. Code compliance and economic development staff have contacted the stores to retrieve the carts, and the police chief and I will meet with the store and direct representatives from Target next week to discuss the cart retrieval issue, but also to discuss how to prevent this from occurring in the future. The city does not have an ordinance addressing shopping carts, and we are hopeful that partnerships with Target and other stores will result in a solution. Here's an update on our Resource Conservation Office grant agreement. AB 7939, as part of tonight's consent agenda, is a grant agreement with the State Recreation and Conservation Office for funds that support the acquisition of the 33-acre Harvey Manning Park expansion, also known as the Bergsma property. The grant award from the state represents the final piece of the funding strategy identified at the time of the acquisition approval in December 2018. At that time, the goal was to obtain $6.82 million in regional and state grants, with the remaining $3.82 million of the purchase being the final contribution by the city of Issaquah. With the $2.6 million identified in the RCO grant agreement tonight, the actual total in regional and state grants awarded for this key land acquisition at Issaquah's gateway to Cougar Mountain was $7.98 million, and that brings the actual final contribution of the city of Issaquah for these 33 acres to 2.69 million, a reduced amount of 1.15 million. So congratulations to City Council, the community, and staff for all taking the lead on this regional effort. The courage and trust of City Council and the professional work of administration and staff to obtain these grant funds was a partnership to recognize and one to applaud. Trail design on this site has been underway this year, with construction proposed to begin next year. Harvey Manning Park will serve as the gateway and key trail connections from the central Issaquah area into the vast trail system of the Cougar Mountain Regional Park. It took a bold effort. They prepared a plan and then they accomplished it. I also wanted to talk a bit about the newly forming Equity Board. Under the consent calendar this evening, we have the appointments of the new Equity Board. We had 23 outstanding community members from a wide variety of racial, ethnic, social, and economic backgrounds step forward to serve on the board. I wish we had a seat for everyone that had applied, and I'm very grateful to have such an amazing community support for this work. I'm honored to present you tonight the newly appointed members of the Equity Board, which consists of 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Part of the 12-member board are 2 youth representatives. The majority of the members are from the diverse communities within our community, and this group brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise, both personal and professional, related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I'm pleased to present them to the City Council for confirmation this evening. The new board will begin meeting in November. We're also having a virtual job fair. Many businesses are struggling to find employees, and we've responded by partnering with WorkSource and other Eastside cities to host a virtual job fair on November 18th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Issaquah businesses can sign up for a no-cost virtual booth on the city's job fair webpage, issaquahwa.gov/jobs. The job fair is just one way that our economic development team is helping businesses. In the past 3 months, they've helped over 25 existing and potential businesses with city-related questions on licensing and permits, as well as made referrals to resources, workshops, and one-on-one advisor services. They've provided data on property and tax trends on the recently updated dashboard. And whether you are an aspiring entrepreneur, or long-established business in our community, they're here to help you. So subscribe to the Business e-News to keep current on business resources, and you can contact them at ed@issaquahwa.gov. That concludes the mayor's report. The next item of business this evening is some informational updates, and we'll be starting with ID 0980, Visit Issaquah Update. And I'd like to invite Visit Issaquah board member Patty Hagar to present this item.
Hi, everyone. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Thank you so much for having me on the agenda tonight. I am actually sitting in for Will Parkinson, who's on vacation. So it's good to be here and nice to see you all. So presenting our 2021 annual report for Visit Issaquah, starting off with the next slide, please. I thought I'd just recap our 2021 activities. So this year we could pretty much divide in half. The first half of the year, we were focused on our B2C outreach and messaging, highlighting all that Issaquah has to offer directly to consumers. We had some really high quality media highlights, including National Plan for Vacation Day, the Alfresco on Front, and we even participated in a virtual Taste of Washington. We focused a lot on community and business outreach, again, with a customer-directed messaging focus. We had some highlights in social media. Our Instagram account alone actually increased by 4,000 followers year over year. About halfway through the year, we had some pretty major changes to our organization. We had the departure of our executive director, Beth Javins. She did move on to another DMO. We also had some significant changes in our board with key departures and a few new additions. Because of that, we did pause or slow down on a lot of our consumer direct messaging. And for the balance of this year, we are focused effective September 1st with guidance and support from the city to change our messaging and objectives to be more B2B with outreach to groups, events, and meetings and industry organizations. The team will be working with our local hotel sales managers to identify and plan pitches to opportunities to bring large groups to the city. And our website and social media will follow suit. Next slide, please. Predicating these changes, of course, we did have some major challenges in 2021. As we all know, COVID-19 did continue to have tourism impact, not just for Issaquah, but really nationwide, globally. The first half of the year in Issaquah, we only had 2 hotels open. We had the Spring Hill Suites and the Homewood Suites. Fortunately, at the end of April, our Hilton Garden Inn was able to reopen. Industry indicators do show an increase in leisure travel. However, there is still maybe a lack of confidence about what sort of travel and activities are truly still safe. As previously mentioned, halfway through the year, we did have an unexpected staff departure and also the restructuring of the Visit Issaquah board. Because of that, we did have a reduced capacity to be strategic and proactive. Next slide, please. So because of that, we are focusing now that for the balance of this year, 2.5 months, we're going to make some adjustments in 2021. The first major change will be board leadership. At any time, we had somewhere from 8 to 11 board members, and we'll be going down to 3, maybe 4. That will absolutely include a city staff member on the board. Because of the staff departures and operational changes, we did actually reduce expenses in 2021 by about $65,000. Looking forward, we are changing focus and setting up for that pivot this year. We have worked with the city staff to revise our statement of work. And we are also pivoting our messaging and outreach to be directed at industry organizations and meeting and event planners. Our website and social media is also changing course as well. Next slide. So for 2022, our primary focus is going to be to hire a new sales manager. And that is a shift from an executive director. This new member, this new Visit Issaquah employee would be specifically focused on sales, on identifying, outreaching, pitching, and closing large groups that would require room nights from multiple hotels in the Issaquah area, if not also partnering with our neighbor communities. We will work within the industry and with meeting and event planners to identify these opportunities and work with the sales managers to pursue. This will all be in coordination and with the support of the city staff on the full scope. And next slide, which is the last slide. That's the update, the annual report from Visit Issaquah. If you have any questions, I will certainly try to answer. Otherwise, you can email us and I will send answers to you.
Thank you, Patty. I am going to, nice pictures. I loved a lot of those scenes with Issaquah. Those are some of my favorites. I am going to look in the chat and see if we have any council members with comments or questions. And also let the council know that Benton Koblenz is also here this evening and is available for questions. So, give me 1 second. And at this point in time, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So Patty, I think we're good. Thank you for the presentation this evening. And just a reminder to those that are watching that there is no action requested of the council this evening. And the next item of business on our calendar is the consent calendar. It was distributed to council in advance, and if it is authorized, the items on the consent calendar get considered together and approved by one motion. I'd like to turn the floor over to Councilmember DeMichel now, who would like to make a statement before we make a motion and take a vote. Councilmember DeMichel.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. I would like to state for the record that I am currently employed with an entity that is included in the city's payables, Influence the Choice. I currently fill the role of temporary executive director of Influence the Choice. The city serves as a fiscal agent for this agency in the disbursement of a federal grant. Grant funds are being dispersed under this month's accounts payable. I have asked for advice from the city attorney as to whether this warrants a conflict of interest and have been informed that I am not legally required to be excused from voting as the city is carrying out a decision that was previously made by the council. However, for the sake of transparency, I would like to declare this employment and have my statement entered in the minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember DeMichelle. Question, have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
They have.
And thank you very much. Does any council member desire to remove any of the items from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? And I will keep an eye on the chat to see if anyone wants to do that. If not, does somebody care to make a motion? Council President Hunt?
Thank you. I move to approve the consent calendar as it appears in this evening's agenda.
That sounds great. And Deputy Council President Ray?
Second.
So it has been moved and seconded, and I'm going to hand this over to the city clerk for her to call the roll.
Starting with Councilmember Walsh,
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle,
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall,
Aye.
Council President Hunt,
Aye.
Councilmember Martz is excused. Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes 6-0. And the next item of business is under regular business this evening, and that's starting with AB 8258, Memorandum of Understanding for the Teamsters 763. The question before the council this evening is to ratify the MOU, and I'd like to invite HR Director Stephanie Johnson to present this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council. Stephanie Johnson, the city's Human Resources Director. The purpose of my presentation tonight is to provide the City Council an update on the mayor's vaccination mandate and staff statistics. And I'm going to pause there while Clerk Geiger is getting our presentation up. And Tisha, if you could advance, that'd be great. So I'll just repeat that the purpose of my presentation tonight is to provide the City Council an update on the mayor's vaccination mandate, and also to provide the council with information in order to make a decision to ratify or not the Memorandum of Understanding with our Teamsters 763 employees representing Public Works operations staff regarding the mandatory vaccine mandate and related incentives. Next slide, please. I thought I'd start tonight's presentation with a background over the last 6 months as it relates to staff vaccinations as we continue to navigate the challenges in the workplace of the COVID-19 pandemic. With safety of our public and our staff, the mayor's highest priority through this. Going back 6 months to June 2021, as we were preparing to reopen city facilities to the public after many, many months of halting many in-person services for many operations. And after vaccinations became available largely to the working population, the city proposed a vaccination incentive to our staff at that time prior to a soft reopening July 6th. As a result of that incentive that we put in place, that moved our staff vaccination percentage from about 55% in May and towards the beginning of June to about 75% as we look to reopen city facilities July 6th. I would be remiss if I did not mention that about 50% of our workforce still provided services in person each day, even when city facilities were closed. That included police, public works, parks and community services, to name a few. As we encourage staff to vaccinate, we also put a new hire requirement to do so in place, or that individuals would need to seek a medical or religious exemption effective July 1st. That meant that any new hire coming into the city was required to be vaccinated as a condition of employment. Fast forward just 1 month to August, we saw the Delta variant arrive. Rising COVID case counts, hospitalizations, and deaths became very prevalent. We saw our nation at large have flattening vaccination rates, including amongst city staff. On August 9th, the state of Washington, King County, and city of Seattle announced mandatory vaccine policies. And the following day, August 10th, Mayor Polly announced a mandate for the city of Issaquah employees to comport with the state, King County, and Seattle. That required that our staff be vaccinated mandatorily by today's date, actually October 18th. Tisha, if you could advance the slide, please. So in HR, we began to impact bargain with our 6 employee unions. We reached our first tentative agreement with our AFSCME group, who represent our general employees across all city departments. As a result, the City Council ratified the MOU with AFSCME the evening of October 4th, just 2 weeks ago. 3 of our 4 police unions have 100% vaccination rates. We continue bargaining with IPOA, but they represent only 1 unvaccinated member with a granted religious exemption. That brings the conversation tonight with a focus on Teamsters 763, representing our public works operations. The city and Teamsters 763 engaged in good faith negotiation through August and September. After exchange of a number of proposals, movement on both sides of the negotiations, and fair and consistent consideration of Teamsters 763 proposals, the city and the Teamsters have agreed that the parties are at impasse. Under Washington State collective bargaining law, the city has the ability to implement its last best and final proposal upon reaching impasse. The terms of the city's last best and final proposal to Teamster 763 are before you tonight and mirror those approved by council for AFSCME. Slide, please. Here on the slide deck, you will see the essential components of the city's last best and final offer with Teamster 763. The proposal includes that employees must be vaccinated or receive medical or religious accommodations by today, October 18th. To offer incentives for employees to vaccinate, we were offering up to 8 hours of vaccine incentive time off, up to 40 hours of leave in case of vaccine side effects, up to 80 hours of leave in case of mandatory quarantine. We also had a provision that allowed leave without pay available if employees work towards vaccination by October 18th but could not finish their series before they actually were intended to lose their position. The proposal also included, the MOU includes that the city and the Teamster 763 would work jointly on health and safety protocols so that we're ensuring that both staff and managers are making sure that the health and safety of our employees are at the front of the work that we do. So I want to give some stats on where we are today citywide, being that today is October 18th, the date of the mayor's mandatory vaccine mandate. This evening, I'm able to share even more up-to-date information than went in the council packet as of Friday, because we've been really trying to give staff every opportunity to provide us vaccination data by today before we move to make decisions about future employment. Today, our vaccinated staff include 201 individuals, and I'm pleased to report that 92% of our city staff population is vaccinated as a result of the mandate. 2 employees have started their vaccination series. We're working with those individuals because they've made a good faith effort to do so. 16 full-time employees are not currently vaccinated. Today, 1 employee did tenure their resignation to the city, and today 2 employees were provided notices of intent to separate. We continue to work with 14 individuals with religious and medical or religious exemption and accommodation requests. Slide advance, please. So tonight, the mandatory vaccination policy, including provisions regarding COVID testing, were issued under the Mayor's Personnel Management Authority. The City Council tonight is being asked for the authority requested to approve the vaccination incentives included herein in the MOU. Slide advance, please. The city and Teamsters were able to reach agreement on many of the vaccine incentives presented in the MOU, but ultimately were not able to reach agreement regarding weekly COVID testing in lieu of vaccination. Tonight, the recommendation of the administration is to ratify the Memorandum of Understanding between the city and Teamsters Local 763 representing Public Works, so that the mayor can authorize and execute that Memorandum of Understanding, and so that we can incentivize those employees who have chosen to stay and vaccinate as a result.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm looking in the chat to see if there are any questions for Stephanie. And I will give it a few seconds. I am not seeing any questions come up. Would someone care to make a motion? Council President Hunt?
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I move to ratify the Memorandum of Understanding between the City and Teamsters Local Union Number 763 regarding mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations and authorize the mayor to execute the Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Ray?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Looking for comments. And I'll keep an eye on the chat. Let's see. Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I will be supporting this. The proposal that we have before us is the best, is what's been negotiated in good faith between the city and Teamsters 763, and I do understand it to be the last best and final proposal for incentives regarding the vaccination mandate. And I think that because this is the best and last final offer, I am in support of the city taking this step. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. And it looks like Councilmember Hall is up next.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. This is Councilmember Hall. I echo the Council President's comments and just want to thank staff for their diligent work with the union in coming up with the last best and final offer. Thank you very much for your work. I wanted to acknowledge a comment that we heard earlier to ensure that people feel and understand that we are taking their feedback into this very genuinely and very authentically. We heard, please make sure if you ratify this that it's part of your values, make sure that it's true to your heart, not necessarily about an advancement or vanity or because other organizations are doing this. And I can say right now with a true heart that I believe this to be good public health policy and good public safety policy. I again just want to thank members of staff for their diligent work on this. Thank you, and I'll be voting yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Walsh?
Thank you. This is Councilmember Walsh. The two before me have said it very well, so I will echo very much what has come from Council President Hunt and Councilmember Hall. This is a tough situation. Anytime you're dealing with employment, anytime you're dealing with personally held beliefs, it's incredibly difficult. And my heart goes out to those who are affected by this. I know we are at this point ratifying or discussing ratification of one set of modifications here, but that's not the only labor union and group of employees that we have gone through. And I want to thank our HR staff just for all of this amazing extra work that has gone into this. I appreciate all of the employees and unions who have come together to discuss what is a very difficult situation. And I too am in support of this, both in providing some incentives for the vaccination as well as ultimately the decision on our administration to put forth a mandate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. I am not seeing anyone else wanting to provide comment, but I'll keep my eye on the chat for another second and do really appreciate that you've chosen to speak to this tonight. In my 40 years of association, either volunteering or working for cities, the best way to describe where we are sometimes right now is just horrible. I've never in my career had to listen to so many people on both sides of this issue in tears over something that is they strongly feel about, no matter which side of the decision they are on in this vaccination conversation. So it's really difficult times. I'm not seeing that anybody else is wanting to provide commentary at this time. And if I could have somebody make a motion.
Mayor, the motion's been made and seconded.
Oh, sorry, calling for the vote. Thank you. So glad we have a city clerk and that I'm not a city clerk. I will have the city clerk call for the vote. Thanks.
Beginning with Councilmember DiMichele.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 0 nays.
That passes 6-0, and we'll be moving on to the next item of business. This is AB 8268, an interlocal agreement with the City of Redmond for mutual aid dispatch services. And I'd like to invite Police Chief Scott Beerbaum and Police Commander Lauren Truscott to present this item.
Good evening. We've been trying to have a little audio trouble here. Thank you. My name is Scott Beerbaum, Chief of Police for the City of Issaquah. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. Commander Truscott is here with us tonight to also help walk us through AB 8268, our interlocal agreement with the City of Redmond for dispatch services. I'm going to turn it over to.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, Mayor. Thank you for having me, City Council. I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm going to talk about the interlocal agreement between the City of Issaquah and the City of Redmond for Redmond to provide mutual aid dispatch services for the Issaquah Police Department and also for Snoqualmie North Bend, who we provide dispatch services for. So go ahead and start the slideshow, please, Chief.
And Chief, this is Tisha. I went ahead and started it.
Okay, so we can go ahead to the first slide, please. So for some background, the City of Issaquah, we provide dispatch services for Issaquah and then Snoqualmie and North Bend. And we also patch those folks to fire and medical services as needed. The Issaquah Police Department Dispatch Center has been experiencing a significant shortage in staffing, which has resulted in an inability to maintain normal operations. We currently have 2 full-time dispatchers and 1 communications supervisor who also fills in and does dispatching, who are tasked with providing public safety dispatch services 24 hours a day, 7 days per week to these 3 cities. So the city is seeking support from the City of Redmond's police communications team, and the Redmond Police Department will assist in answering 911 calls, dispatching police services, and also training new Issaquah police dispatchers. The interlocal agreement began on September 1st and will terminate on January 31st of 2022. Next slide, please. Here's a broad overview of the estimated financial impacts. If you guys want to just look at the numbers, I don't need to read all of them to you, but you can see the estimated total cost is on the low end, $202,000, on the high end, $355,000. Some of these costs will be covered by savings that are in the budget from vacancies, and then also some of these costs will be reimbursed to us from the E911, the King County E911 escrow fund that's available to us. So we recommend that administration recommends authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute the interlocal agreement with the city of Redmond so that we can continue providing dispatch services to Issaquah, Snoqualmie, and North Bend.
Thank you, Commander Trescott. Chief Beerbaum, I'm looking into the chat to see if there are any council members with questions, and I will give that a minute or so. Councilmember Hall, followed by Deputy Council President Ray.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Hall. First and foremost, thank you for the presentation. I just have a quick question, and I'm curious what our communications with our contract cities with North Bend were like in developing this proposal. Thank you.
What was their involvement in developing the ILA?
How, or I guess framing it another way, what was our communication like? Were they a part of the process, or was that just notifying them? It's just a clarification for me.
Yes, they've been part of the process since we started reaching out for assistance with dispatch services. They've actually even provided some dispatch aid to us because 2 of our former dispatchers are employees there. But yeah, we're in daily communication, well, almost daily communication with Captain Almquist, who's one of the commanders there. And then the chief's been in constant communication with Chief Phipps.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Commander Trescott. Deputy Council President Ray.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. This is Chris Ray. I'm curious about the variable cost line because it is significantly large spread. What are the factors that will determine what the variable costs are in the agreement?
I can take a crack at this, Chief, and if you want to step in and provide any input, that would be helpful as well. The main factor is employee overtime that we cannot predict. And also Redmond is going to assist in providing training with new dispatchers as they are hired and onboarded. And so we don't know how many employees, hopefully there'll be a lot that we hire, and how many hours that will take. And so those are the 2 main factors that are just out of our control. Chief, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can add just a little bit more. It does really truly depend upon how many hours that they are going to be fulfilling on their side of the ILA. It depends on how many of our staff are able to fill in the dispatching portion for Issaquah, and then how much they will be assisting with the field training as well. It also depends upon the timing of how quickly we are able to get our staff up to the appropriate numbers, and then not have to rely on Redmond for assistance. So that's why there's a large amount of variables.
Thank you, Chief. Deputy Council President Ray, did you have a follow-up question?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I am not seeing any other questions at this time. Is someone prepared to make a motion? Council President Hunt?
Thank you. I move to authorize the mayor to enter into and execute the interlocal agreement between the city of Redmond and the city of Issaquah for mutual aid dispatch services.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Ray?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? And again, I'll keep my eye on the chat. At this point in time, I'm not seeing anything, so I will go to the city clerk and have her do the roll call vote.
Starting with Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DiMichele.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. That passes unanimously, and I want to thank both Commander Trescott and Chief Beerbaum for, again, working under these difficult circumstances, and again, working in kind of a brave new world that we've never had to do this before. So thank you for your work on that.
Thank you, Mayor.
The next item on our agenda this evening is AB 7901, Forest Carbon Credit Program application, Harvey Manning Park acquisition. And I would like to invite Parks Director Jeff Watling to join us and present this item. Jeff.
Mayor, thanks so much. Good evening, Council. Jeff Watling, Parks and Community Services Director. Pardon me while I share my screen here. Take it you can all see that.
Yes, we can.
Hear me, great. Again, well, good evening. Tonight, excited to be
Jeff,
back.
I'm just going to tell you, you're kind of in the presenters mode where we can see all your slides. Is there something you want to click on to? There we go. Thanks.
Oh, all right, great. Thanks, Mayor. All right, so tonight we're bringing back a topic that we discussed, it seems like a long time ago, Q1, about January of 2020, prior to the pandemic. Joining me tonight, I'm going to give the broad overview in the staff report, but also here tonight are Liz Johnson and Mark McPherson from City Forest Credits. They're our nonprofit partner who we've been working with so closely on this. As well, Jennifer Fink is here. Jennifer's our park planner with the City of Issaquah, also serving as staff lead in this application process. As I mentioned, we had discussed this in early 2020, just prior to the pandemic. Throughout the pandemic, we've continued some really hard and important work with our partner, City Forest Credits, as well as a number of other agencies in sort of preparing and aligning this opportunity. What we have tonight is a request by you, City Council, to authorize us to submit the city's first carbon credit application. Some background first, talking a little bit about that meeting we had in February of 2020, where we talked about and took the opportunity to introduce you as to what the carbon credit market is and the opportunities we have before us. As I said earlier, Mark McPherson with City Forest Credits was there as well. Had a chance to introduce Mark. Mark gave some excellent background work on what this opportunity is and presents. At that time, in February of last year, we proposed pursuing a pilot project and focusing on a planting project and an application with the potential of revenues that would be used to support our Green Issaquah Forest Steward program. You'll hear a little bit later in the staff report, we're actually proposing a slight pivot to having our pilot pilot application be an acquisition. I'll touch on that in a little bit. At that meeting in February, through feedback with you as council members, you provided us some great feedback as well as support and direction to continue to explore this program and this opportunity for us in Issaquah. A little bit that you heard at that meeting, and also just a refresher as to why. Why should we pursue this opportunity? Part of this was, again, presented in February. Carbon credits have been a market for a number of years now, 25 plus years. There's a growing history as to what this commodity looks like in the open market. What has been missing is the opportunity for cities like ourselves and the urban forests that we own to be able to tap into this market. And that's where the work of City Forest Credit, the Seattle-based nonprofit group, has really created this vehicle and this opportunity for cities and towns to be represented by City Forest Credits and jump into this market as a potential funding source for our urban forest work. These next two slides give a really broad, and I will state broad, example of how this carbon credit process works for us as a city, where we're not going directly to market, and where this interface and partnership with City Forest Credits really makes it possible. And that we look and consider a project. That project could either be tree planting or acquisition based. We then work with City Forest Credits. We follow their protocols, their directives, their expertise. Through that work, City Forest Credits then issues us the number of credits that would be related to that project, and how those projects could then in turn, in the second step, be brought to market and sold to potential buyers. As a buyer purchases those specific credits that we worked with City Forest Credits to create, that in turn creates revenue for the city. A little bit as to the benefits. Why would we do this? Why would we consider doing this? One is that it connects our city forests to these new funding opportunities, these new opportunities to utilize the land that we already steward to generate some revenue to help us steward and invest right back into those essential urban forests. In that sense, it really is a win-win. Carbon buyers, those that are purchasing, get valuable credits that they're seeking in the city infrastructure, the city properties where in many cases their customers and employees live. The cities, as I said earlier, get funding, get revenue to help maintain those trees and maintain the function of those critical urban forests. And in the end, we all really achieve so much of what the mission, value, and goals that we have here in Issaquah, striving for a greener, healthier, more equitable community and city. As I said earlier, there are two types of projects that we can take to market, if you will, and work with City Forest Credits on. One really focuses on plantings, where we are, through planting efforts, are creating new capacity, carbon storage capacity. Another type of project that can be taken to market are acquisition preservation projects, where there's a recent acquisition that helped to preserve in perpetuity carbon capture within those trees. As I said earlier, when we were initially exploring this, we thought this, and it still does, dovetail nicely with a number of the planting efforts that we do year after year in terms of creating succession plantings for our urban forest. With that type of project, though, there are a number of factors that are a little more dynamic and a little bit more complex. As we continued our work with City Forest Credits through the pandemic, we felt that as a pilot project, utilizing an acquisition and our most recent acquisition of the Harvey Manning Park expansion, the Bergsma property, those 33 acres, were really a strategic opportunity to have that become our pilot project. Also, over this last year and a half, there's a lot of really important work that has happened with the grant providers, namely the Recreation Conservation Office at the state. We spent a number of hours and a number of meetings working with RCO, with the tremendous help of Mark and the City Forest Credit Group, to make sure that RCO themselves understood what the carbon market meant and what it meant for a partnership like this, a sale like this means on land that we have received grants for. And through that work, RCO now certainly sees the benefit of this and has really created the opportunity now for us to consider that acquisition to be the pilot project to pursue. So with that, the proposal before you tonight is requesting your authorization for us to submit an application for the Harvey Manning Park acquisition preservation, those 33 acres, and to authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents to secure this as the city's first carbon sale. I'll note, as we worked with finance, the finance department, revenues from this sale would be deposited in the general fund with the benefit of the new tracking system we have. These revenues would be closely tracked and would be used, and it could be identified to fund solely the Green Issaquah forest management work, recognizing that would certainly help that program and assist the needed expenditures over the next number of years. I feel there's a really important nexus, obviously, with this revenue and then the expenditures from this carbon sale directly benefiting the ongoing stewardship of not only those 33 acres, but our urban forest. Should you authorize and approve this tonight, next steps would be the submittal of our application documents to City Forest Credits. They in turn would represent us, and once a buyer is found, we would then execute all those necessary documents, including the purchase and sale agreement. As we have been working with City Forest Credits on the number of credits that 33 acres of property would yield, we're looking at revenue in the neighborhood of $200,000. Like I said, those funds would then allow us to invest those proceeds back into the urban forest that we're managing. We anticipate project completion at the end of this year or early next year. Within our agenda bill staff report, as we look at alternatives, certainly an alternative you have before you tonight would be to not authorize this submittal in this application at this time. I would note the impact if we don't do that. We would probably need to look at a different pilot project, as the opportunity window for acquisition preservation projects is time sensitive to when that actual sale happened. So we would need to consider another option should we not pursue the Harvey Manning Park expansion opportunity tonight. And with that, thank you so much for listening to this quick staff report. Again, the recommendation before you by staff and administration is to authorize submittal of this application and pursuit of our first City Forest carbon sale. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Director Watling. I remember the afternoon you invited me into the first meeting to talk about this, and you were giddy. You were so excited that Issaquah could participate in something like this. Are there any questions from council members on the presentation? Keep my eye on the chat. If I do not have any, and I don't see them, do we have somebody able to make a motion? Council President Hunt.
Thank you. I move to authorize submittal of a carbon credit application for the Harvey Manning Park acquisition preservation project and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents, including a purchase and sale agreement to secure the city's first carbon sale.
And Deputy Council President Ray?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Comments? Would anybody like to speak to it? Let's start with Council President Hunt, followed by Council Member Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate that carbon credits have been around for a while. I think the carbon accounting is also a complicated area, and our understanding of what really makes a difference in this space is evolving and changing, and there are new best practices around it. So I do appreciate some of the materials that were provided in our packet about how we are adhering to those best practices. One is the no double counting attestation. That's one of the issues around carbon counting, is you can sort of get, you have to avoid getting credit for the same thing multiple ways. And I also appreciate that the funds, the revenue generated from this will be used to maintain our forest health, because one of the other issues around carbon credits is that they're really only sequestering carbon, and they're really only valuable if we maintain those forests in a healthy state. So I do appreciate that we are using that revenue to that end, and I will be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Hall. You know, this was actually one of the first policies that I reviewed as a new council member back in January of last year, and I have been so eager and excited to implement ever since, even though we had a little bit of a delay. I think this is an outstanding opportunity for the market to purchase carbon credits here in Issaquah and for business and organizations to offset their carbon footprint and support, you know, our community's environmental values. And because of that support, the revenues we collect will be able to go right back into the environment and forest management in meaningful ways that are clear to me are in line with our city's mission and vision, and of course our strategic plan. I also think that this is an excellent project to pilot the policy, so I commend Director Watling and administration for going this way. And I also want to thank City Forest Credits for their partnership in this work, and of course Director Watling for his leadership in this space too. And with that, I will be supporting the initiative this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. I do not see any others requesting to comment, so I'll just give it a few seconds longer and keep my eye on the chat. And I will now tee up the city clerk to do the roll call vote.
Starting with Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 0 nays.
That is great. Thank you very much. That passes 6-0, and I just want to thank this whole team here this evening, Jennifer, Mark, and Jeff. And not sure if Liz is also with that group. That's going to throw her name in anyway. Thank you for doing this. Really exciting, really forward-thinking pilot. This is really great. We are very appreciative that we're able to take advantage of this in Issaquah. So thank you all very much. We will move on to the next item of business, which is AB 8254, the American Rescue Plan Act funding allocation. This is about Small Business Flex Fund and the Issaquah Rental Assistance Program. The action before council this evening will be to authorize it. And I'd like to invite Benton Koblenz, Recovery Coordinator, and Monica Negria, Human Services Manager, to present this item.
Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Benton Koblenz, and I'm presenting to you tonight in the guise of Recovery Coordinator for the city. And I will be joined in just a minute by Monica Negrilla, Human Services Manager for the City of Issaquah. So our purpose here tonight is twofold. First is to provide funding recommendations to fill some of the urgent needs in our community with funding through the American Rescue Plan Act allocation for the city. In particular, an investment in the Small Business Flex Fund and the creation of a 2021-2 Issaquah Rental Assistance Program. The second purpose is to discuss and update the City Council on support for other local Issaquah governmental agencies performing essential work. So I'll just make at this point two big caveats. So the first is that future long-term investments will be considered through a more comprehensive process in 2022. So tonight we're really trying to present and talk about some of those urgent needs and how we can fill them before the end of this year. The second is, of course, that hindsight will be 2020. So we see the urgent needs as they present themselves right now. But it's, of course, no guarantee that you know, the situation won't change. As we know from our experience over the past year and a half, conditions on the ground can change quite rapidly. And we hope that you know, the situation will only get better from here, but staff are prepared to continue our work in updating our knowledge and continuing our outreach to make sure we don't miss future urgent needs as they present themselves. So a little bit of background about the process around the allocation of the city's American Rescue Plan Act funds. So, of course, the American Rescue Plan Act was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Biden back in March of 2021. The City Council had a study session back in April of 2021, and there were quite a few different findings and conclusions in that study session. But one of the major ones was a need to investigate those urgent needs that are in the community. And so in June of 2021, the administration proposed and the City Council approved the creation of the position of Recovery Coordinator, which I stepped into in June as well, with the express purpose of investigating those urgent needs and making recommendations to try and fill them. So in August, early August, I made an initial update to the City Council, which we'll talk a little bit more about as background about some of those urgent needs that I had found over the course of the summer. But I promised to return, and that's why we're here tonight, is to talk about kind of some of those next steps and how to allocate some of our funding to fill those urgent needs. And as we begin the new year, of course, we'll be taking additional steps and doing additional outreach and starting on the process of making some decisions around those future long-term investments. So as a reminder, that outreach back in the summer, and these are the summer figures, and they're larger now today, but these were the ones I had available to add. So talked with more than 20 now nonprofits in our community, more than 20 then local small business owners in Issaquah, presented in front of several boards and commissions for the city, and of course have continued conversations with the city's vision partners, all about the needs that there are in our community. And so that outreach resulted in these 5 identified urgent needs: a lack of workforce, which continues to present itself to small businesses and nonprofits alike; access to capital, which we're here to talk a lot more about tonight; nonprofit capacity, which was devastated by the pandemic and economic crisis; access to mental health, which continues to present itself as an urgent need; and of course, connection to human services. So those 5 needs are what I talked about back in early August, and in continuing outreach and conversations with community members, those 5 needs have only been reinforced as still urgent needs that are present in the community. But of course, many of them take more than just one investment, and so we're continuing to work on figuring out ways to address them. But we think we have 2 of them tonight that will help make a big dent in the gap. So our proposal is again twofold. So one is an investment in the state's Small Business Flex Fund, which I'll start off with. And then the other is the creation of an Issaquah Rental Assistance Program, which I'll invite Monica to step up to talk about. But first, about the Small Business Flex Fund. So the Small Business Flex Fund is a statewide loan fund that provides flexible working capital loans to small businesses across the state. Those loan amounts can range all the way up to $150,000, but the estimate for average loan amount is about $50,000 to $80,000. Those loans would come with low interest rates. So for small businesses, they would be 4 to 4.5%, and for nonprofits, they would be 3 to 3.5%. Which, depending on how many of you, did a refinance on your mortgage, it might or might not seem like a low interest rate. But for these small business owners and nonprofits, the interest rates that they would get on the private market, if they could get a loan, would be much, much higher than this, north of 10 or north of 12%. And so this is a big improvement on those private market loans. The loans would have a maturity of 60 to 72 months, and eligibility for this program would be Small businesses with fewer than 50 employees with annual revenues of less than $3 million that experienced a direct economic hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic and that were in business prior to June 30th of 2021. The overall goal of the Small Business Flex Fund is to provide access to capital for businesses that otherwise wouldn't have that access. So in particular for women and minority owned businesses that don't have access to traditional capital. That's their goal, and that's the goal that they've had in mind when they've designed the parameters of this program, and have designed kind of the outreach that they've implemented and the partners they've chosen. So that's the goal and design of the program, but it comes with some additional benefits for us as we consider an investment. So first off, since we're in the early days yet of the Flex Fund, they are able to promise us a 2-to-1 match on any investment that we make. And so if we were to make an investment of $300,000, the state would match with an additional $600,000 for a total capitalization of $900,000. They're able to do that because they have access to private funds and state funds from across the state. They're well underway in distributing loans already, but they still have plenty available to provide this match to us. And that match would be for a conglomeration of East Side cities, which the East Side cities that do invest would have that match available to them. And so the $300,000 base would get allocated directly to Issaquah businesses. The $600,000 in match would be promised at least to East Side businesses. But we think that with our outreach and their outreach, Issaquah businesses should be able to take full advantage, hopefully, of that $900,000. So that's one additional advantage. The second, of course, is in administrative capacity. And so the state and the Flex Fund has a lot of capacity that if even a group of local governments or one government certainly, if they were to do it on their own, they couldn't do this program even at their own local level. And so by investing in a larger fund, the city is able to take advantage of that additional administrative capacity. But the last additional advantage, and I think is one of the most important for us, are those partners that the Flex Fund has chosen. So the community development financial institutions, which are organizations that provide the actual loans to small businesses and to nonprofits. And many of those work here locally on the East Side. Many of them are familiar with Issaquah and many of our businesses and those who need it. And they're also able to provide technical assistance. So it's not just access to capital that these organizations are able to take advantage of, but it's also the technical assistance to take better advantage of the loan itself and to work through the full process of application, approval, and repayment. So not only is it a lower interest loan, but small businesses are able to, reap higher rewards from the loan itself. So all in all, the Flex Fund, we've seen a big need for it in our community and from our small local business owners who've asked for and expressed the need for that access to capital. And we think that that the Flex Fund itself provides a number of benefits that make this investment worth it tonight. So that's my portion of tonight's recommendation. And so I'll turn it over to Monica to talk a little bit more about the rental assistance program.
Thank you very much, Benton. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This is Monica Negrilla, Human Services. Tonight, I'm joined also here by Lucy Pyatt, who's the Director of Energy and Financial Assistance at HopeLink. Following the presentation, both Lucy and I are available to answer further questions you might have. So to begin, first I would like to provide a brief overview of the rental assistance program we are proposing tonight, and then next in a few minutes, I would like to dive a little bit deeper and provide a summary of the identified needs and gaps we noticed in our community. But to begin, the goal of the program that we are proposing in front of you tonight is to really assist the community in recovering from the negative economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic by supplementing the current assistance programs in place, such as the King County Eviction Prevention Rental Assistance Program, and also other assistance available and provided by our local nonprofit partners. So what we are proposing in front of you tonight would be a program developed in partnership with HopeLink, one of our current nonprofit rental assistance providers. And here I would like to make a brief note to mention that Issaquah Community Services and St. Vincent de Paul, the Issaquah St. Joseph Conference, were really strongly considered for these options, and we know that they have been faithful local partners in distributing financial assistance for many, many years. However, preference in the end was given towards the agency with capacity to meaningfully manage and distribute federal funds, in particular ARPA funds. All agencies that we work with have been vetted by the Human Services Commission during the 2020 fund allocations and are current recipients of the Human Services grants. So back to our proposal, our program would provide up to 3 months of overdue rent per household, and eligibility for the program would be limited to, of course, current Issaquah residents and households meeting income requirements at or below 80% of the area median income, which is for a household of 4 in 2021, it's about $90,500 per household. And of course, eligibility would be also limited to those with demonstrated need of temporary financial assistance due to a COVID impact. Next slide, please, Benton. Thank you. As I mentioned, next, I'm gonna provide a brief summary of the identified needs and gaps. And I would like to highlight, as we all know, the moratorium is set to expire at the end of this month. And financial assistance providers in the city has seen an increase in the number of community members requesting help. I do want to acknowledge that really estimating an exact number for the needs in our community has been challenging. I think the main reason, as Benton mentioned earlier also, information has been changing from month to month rapidly, sometimes from week to week. And it's really hard to really identify the true gaps. And so to try to do our best estimate of the gap, we reached out to King County and requested an update of the EPRAP, the Eviction Prevention Rental Assistance Program, as it applies to Issaquah residents. We also reached out to our local rental assistance providers and local landlords. Next slide, please, Benton. So from King County, we confirmed that residents with incomes between 50 and 80% AMI, which is roughly those for a family of 4, those with incomes between $57,000 and $90,000, do not qualify for the EPRAP program or the King County rental assistance programs available. And also from local rental assistance providers, we got an updated information on how much of their current budget have spent. And then from local landlords, our human services staff, big thanks and shout outs to our human services coordinator, Hannah, who contacted landlords individually via phone and emails to inquire about the overdue rent. So as of last week, we had learned that in 12 apartment complexes, overdue rent was mounting to about $1.2 million. As of today, that number was up to $1.5 million, as we heard from additional apartment complexes. And so we estimate that about 2/3 of this amount is for residents with incomes between 50 and 80% AMI. We know and we acknowledge that the needs are always larger than the resources. And we also know that this is a temporary relief program that we hope can provide a bridge as we enter the holiday season and the end of the moratorium and people return to work. So therefore, tonight we are here proposing $300,000 to help cover some of the needs and supplement the existing programs in place. So with that, Benton, I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Yeah, so thank you, Monica. So that is the recommendation tonight, is to authorize a total of $600,000 in allocations from the city's American Rescue Plan Act funding to go to an investment in the Small Business Flex Fund and the creation of an Issaquah rental assistance program to fill those two big gaps in our community. And if approved tonight, contracting for both programs would take place over the course of November. So we would return to the City Council with contracts, with implementation to start around December of 2021. So we'll still be working in particular to figure out the last final details about ARPA eligibility and how to ensure that these comport with the federal guidelines. And then these investments would continue through 2022 and beyond. So that's the timing and next steps for those two recommendations. We'll also want to provide an opportunity tonight to discuss support for other local Issaquah governmental agencies performing essential work. And that update is that there are essentially two local governmental agencies serving Issaquah residents who are not in the category of agency to receive direct American Rescue Plan Act allocations. So that is Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District, and then Eastside Fire and Rescue. So the city has started to consider what those kinds of investments and partnerships might look like using American Rescue Plan Act dollars. And so we'd like to ask for the City Council's input on that tonight. And then we'll just note that there are future opportunities for investment as well. So as we start those conversations about long-term investments, we're also thinking about the other urgent needs that have yet to be filled. And so we're talking about a resident resource center and what a model like that to connect Issaquah residents with human services and to fill the wide number of gaps that there are for human services connections in Issaquah. So we're working on that model. Also a parks program expansion to help provide some before and after school care expanded in 2022. And then also working on understanding a little bit more what a nonprofit relief program might look like with these dollars in particular. So working through the eligibility and reporting requirements of those. And so we hope to return with some updates about that in the future. But I will just leave it off here with that twofold purpose to get your input on the proposals tonight and the update about local governmental agencies. So thank you all for your time. And Monica, I and HopeLink are here to answer any questions.
That is great. Thank you, Benton. I'm wondering if for the purposes of focusing in questions into different buckets, if we don't first take questions on your business flex fund and go through anything that council might have on that, and then a separate round of questions or clarifications on the rental assistance program. And do you want to get the advice on the third party agencies before they act on the agenda bill, or do you want to get it after they act on the agenda bill?
Whichever is preferable to you
Okay,
and to
well,
the city
I'll
council.
defer to the council as they go through their questions. So already have some folks in the queue. So let's start with the Small Business Flex Fund, and Councilmember Michelle, do you have a question on that, or is your question on the rental assistance?
My question's on the rental assistance, so I'll wait.
I will hold you then. Councilmember Walsh?
Thank you. I have questions on both. So I'll start with the business. I think in the presentation, I got a pretty clear sense of what the need was on the rental assistance side, but I'm not sure I got a sense of the need on the business side. And in particular, we're looking at budget higher than average sales tax. And so I'm trying to understand either the financial needs of businesses or the number of businesses that you've talked to that have expressed a need, and kind of that as a sense, and then how does that relate to the 300,000 that you proposed?
Hey, Benton?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say, of course, both in purposeful outreach about the American Rescue Plan Act funding, as well as my day-to-day work as the Economic Development Coordinator as well. I've spoken with quite a few, probably maybe I would estimate about 36 businesses or so. And about a third of those have expressed some need for, many of course ask for a reiteration of a grant program, which because they have need for capital to make their investments or to make their payments or to keep their staff, kind of a variety of different needs. And so the Flex Fund, the Flex Fund provides that kind of fills that gap in terms of capital. So it's not a grant program, but it's the next best thing from it. And I'll say the kind of official estimates that we've been utilizing are based on the EIDL program. And so there are about 1,800 businesses in Issaquah based on official statistics that could take advantage of the EIDL program. And again, they're about a third, interestingly enough, have taken advantage of the EIDL program, which is somewhat similar in at least purpose, if not design. And so we estimate that there's about a third of businesses that still need access to capital or would take advantage of that if given the chance. And so we think that we think that this investment paired with the match will certainly be taken advantage of by Issaquah businesses. But we also think kind of trying to arrive at it from a different angle as well. So some of our peer cities here on the east side are thinking about, so in particular, the city of Renton has made an allocation of $1 million into the Small Business Flex Fund, and the city of Bellevue is considering something about the same scale. And so when you assume that the kind of contours of the need are the same in Issaquah as they are in those cities, which we honestly have good reason to believe, you get a figure about 1/3 of what they invested, so about 300,000. And so that's how we kind of arrive at understanding what the need looks like, as well as this specific proposal tonight. If that all makes sense and answers your question.
Benton, I wonder if you could add a little bit more. Councilmember Walsh was talking about the increase in sales tax revenue as an indicator of health. Not all of the businesses that you are thinking would do capacity loans necessarily are in the retail area. They may be other kinds of businesses. So is that, how do you use the metric of increased sales tax when you think things through like that?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Polly. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That many of the businesses that we're thinking about wouldn't be reflected in those increased sales tax figures. So in particular, I'm thinking about businesses that have kind of a prolonged experience through the COVID-19 pandemic. So like those businesses that are involved in international trade endeavors. There's a couple of small businesses that we've talked with here, that get their materials from abroad, and they've had a really prolonged experience as the pandemic, of course, continues to affect international endeavors like that, or certainly businesses that have prolonged effects from the supply chain constraints. So and of course now as we do enter this period where there's the vaccination verification mandate as well, we're uncertain about kind of what effects that might have for many of our local restaurants in particular. And so yeah, there's a number of businesses whose where the increased sales tax revenue might be kind of a red herring for what many, especially small businesses, are experiencing here in our community.
Thank you, Benton. Councilmember Walsh, does that answer your question? And do you have any additional questions on the business side of this?
Yes and yes. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so next,
so-
this is a new question?
Yep, new question.
Great,
New
thanks.
question. So you've talked about this as an investment that I believe I heard is going to be combined with other East Side cities and then matched by a state fund. And so is that just a big bucket that all of the East Side city businesses would pull from? Is there no allocation between the cities of a certain size? And then similar along that, if we don't invest, does that mean that Issaquah businesses cannot apply for the Business Flex Fund? Or if we invest at a lower amount, can fewer businesses access that Flex Fund?
Yeah. So I think there's multiple parts to that question. So overall, the Small Business Flex Fund is capitalized at something like $100 million for all the businesses across Washington State. And so what this investment would mean is that we would get our share for sure, right? And so there wouldn't be, local businesses could take advantage of it, but by making this investment, we ensure that at least $300,000 goes directly to our community. And then the state, in addition, is promising that an additional $600,000 of that much larger pool of funding would go to our subregion. And so to those cities on the east side that make this investment. And so it would essentially be a promise of $900,000 to our subregion allocated directly to us, if that makes sense. And so what this ensures is that our community is able to take full advantage of it, and able to to actually participate in the process. If that makes sense.
A follow-up question, Councilmember Walsh?
Yeah, now I'm more confused. So is any of the money, either the $300,000 or the $900,000 that you're proposing, allocated specifically to Issaquah, or does it all go into a bucket for East Side cities?
Yeah, specifically the 300,000 is allocated directly to us. They've promised, and so yeah, so that is the component that is.
Okay, and then I appreciate that. Then my follow-up question becomes, if the money of that 300,000 is not granted out to businesses at a certain point, does it get returned to the city?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we don't think that that would happen, just for one. But if it did, it would, in theory, be returned to us. And there's actually some, because of some very technical ways where of how the Flex Fund is set up, as well as ARPA eligibility. There's some ways that the 300,000 might return to us, even if it was taken full advantage of by our local community as well. And so, so yes, is the answer.
I'm sorry, what? The money could be returned to us. Okay, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah. So yeah, and it's kind of it would be a strange scenario because of the way that the ARPA eligibility influences this investment, and so our funding would go towards the costs of loans, and they would set aside the equivalent amount for our community, and so in kind of a very strange circumstance, if the costs that it takes, which includes kind of the subsidization that from that 10% down to 4%, if for whatever reason that was smaller than what they expected it, they might still return even though they had given the equivalent amount to Issaquah local businesses. And so we're working on kind of making sure that that works out properly just for ARPA eligibility. But it would be a very strange circumstance. So.
Thank you,
Sounds like
Benton.
you've gone deep and dived into this, so I appreciate that.
I'm wondering if he's regretting being the recovery manager with all this new, let's try something like this and how's it going to work? But
Yeah,
Lindsay, do you have any other questions on the business side before I start to move through to the housing side?
Yeah, just one other question. Benton, you had stated that we're investing early in this program, and that's one of the reasons why we're being offered a 2-to-1 grant match. So I'm wondering if there's a deadline or an urgency on putting this fund in, kind of what that timeline looks like, and if we have any sense when that 2-to-1 match might go away.
Yeah, it had originally been, so it's based on how fast the rest of the fund gets depleted, right? And so the original estimate had actually been by November 1st. I learned this week that that's been loosened a little bit. And so it's unclear exactly when kind of they'll hit that threshold where they can no longer make those promises. But I think it's fair to say that by the end of the year.
And there.
Councilmember Walsh, thanks. We're having a little bit of issue with your video. Sometimes it's freezing, but it's still pretty good. Council President Hunt on the business side.
Thank you. This is Council President Hunt. I wanted to make sure that I tracked some of the questions that Councilmember Walsh had asked. So my understanding is that this 300,000 would be specific to businesses in Issaquah. So it would only be eligible for businesses in Issaquah to apply for that at the interest rates that you mentioned. But then the match would be eligible to Issaquah, but also eligible for other cities in our subregion, which is the east side. But we would also then, Issaquah cities would also be eligible for the match for say, Bellevue and for Renton and other cities. So that would be a much larger pool that Issaquah would also be eligible for. Is that all tracking?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay, and would Issaquah residents be eligible for the Issaquah businesses be eligible for the subregion's broader funds in any event, even if we didn't put in the 300,000? It would be smaller because it wouldn't have the match from Issaquah, but Issaquah residents would be eligible for a smaller amount in that case.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have a definitive answer on that. I believe the answer is no, however, based on my understanding of the current kind of negotiations with the Flex Fund.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on business? I have some folks lined up on the housing side as well. Okay, seeing no others, let's start with Councilmember DeMichelle and Councilmember Walsh and then Councilmember Hunt. Councilmember DeMichelle.
Thank you. That was a really interesting discussion there. So thank you, Ben. My question was, so the eviction moratorium ends on October 31st. And we're thinking it would be in December before we would get the rental assistance program up and running. So Monica, do we have are we working with landlords and tenants for that gap month, or what's the plan for helping people who are in distress over their rent as we have that gap period where we maybe don't have anything to help them?
Thank you so much, Councilmember DeMichelle. My personal hope is that first, we are not going to have a whole month gap. However, I do want to defer to Benton because he knows more about ARPA funding. I think in normal conditions, it wouldn't take us more than a week to enter into a contract with HopeLink. We might have a little bit extra time just because of ARPA requirements. We are trying to learn from local other neighboring jurisdictions, and the city of Bellevue and Kirkland are a little bit ahead of us. So we are trying to implement their forms and so speed up the process. So first and foremost, I think that's going to be our goal, not to have a 1 month gap. On the other end, though, we are working with the other local rental assistance providers, including HopeLink, who HopeLink currently still has some funds, and our local providers also have some additional funds. They spent about 70 to 80% of their funds for the year. So we hope that gap, then we are going to promote heavily the existing resources until the new program will be set up. So I think that's our plan and hope for the next few weeks.
Thank you, Monica. Councilmember DeMichelle.
I just wanted to add that I would prefer if we did I do have a comment about the other agencies, and my preference would be that we take this up and vote and then take those comments. So I'll just put that on.
Thank you for that. And Councilmember Walsh, that was a similar question that she was asking. So we'll go to Council President Hunt.
Thanks. Monica, you specifically mentioned that we were considering contracting with HopeLink because of the capacity that they were able to provide. And I wondered, and potentially this is a question for the HopeLink representative, wondered about the capacity as far as a larger amount, such as 500,000, because we also have data today presented about the extensive need, and it is more than 300,000. So I wondered if somebody could speak to the capacity of HopeLink for a larger amount.
Probably would be best to be Lucy. So let's have Lucy unmute.
Hi, everyone, and thank you all for letting me join you this evening, and Monica and the entire team for considering rental assistance for this fund. Yeah, so for HopeLink right now, capacity-wise, we would have some capability to take on additional funds. With additional funds would mean additional staff, and so we would want to look at proportional admin rates for the contract to be able to consider adding additional staff. We have, as of 2 weeks ago, added 17 new team members to my department in rental and energy assistance. And so 7 new team members, 5 brand new positions, I should say 6 brand new positions for rental assistance. continue to look for where the need is to add that staff. I'll say that with the caveat that hiring is, we are not exempt from the challenges of the hiring environment right now. And so there is some time that is added to that, but we are open to that discussion.
Thank you, Lucy. Council President Hunt? All done? Okay. I did not see any additional questions on the housing. Is there someone who would care to make a motion? Let's go to Council President Hunt.
I move to authorize the allocation of $600,000 of the city's American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funding as follows. $300,000 for an investment in the state's Small Business Flex Fund and $300,000 for the creation of an Issaquah rental assistance program, and to direct the finance director to include the revenue and related expenditures in a subsequent 2021 budget amendment.
Deputy Council President Ray?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded, open for discussion. Council President, did you want to speak to the motion first?
Yes. Yes, thank you. I appreciate the additional information on the Small Business Flex Fund. I think what is particularly compelling to me is that the businesses and nonprofits that will be eligible if we approve this funding would not be eligible at all for these loans if we were to not approve this funding. So eligible for some that are restricted to Issaquah, but also to a much larger pool that wouldn't otherwise they wouldn't otherwise be able to access. So for that reason, I do think this funding makes sense. I think going forward, it's very important, I think, to continue to assess the urgency of needs, particularly in this area. Then regarding the rental assistance, I think we were provided with some very compelling evidence about the extent of need here, which is good information for us to have and which I believe we should absolutely use. Benson spoke to putting a dent in the gap, which I think is a good metaphor here. I don't expect that we would be able to completely address this gap that has been identified for rental assistance needs for 50 to 80% AMI, but I do think we should address what I think of as a more of a dent in the gap. I would like to see us address more of the dent in the gap. Also, there was more information today as far as we are on track to have a gap here of about $1.7 million in overdue rents if all of the people that were that the Human Services tried to contact to get back. So we got more information that led us to have a higher amount of overdue rents as the estimate from 1.2 to 1.5. If that trend continues, it would probably be 1.7. And I expect that might also not be the correct number because we are approaching an eviction cliff that we've known about for a long time and that has papered over a lot of need for a long time. And I think now we're finally seeing what that need really looks like. So to that end, I would like to that end, and because I feel strongly that this eviction cliff has been something that we should address now, is I would like to make a amendment to the motion. So I would amend to change the $300,000 for the creation of the Issaquah Rental Assistance Program to $500,000.
And looking for a second. Councilmember DiMichele?
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded, and I wonder, Lucy, if you might be able to provide commentary for the council. This is an interesting concept, and as Benton said earlier, and Monica, things are changing daily sometimes. So it is really hard to be super concrete. If the city were to, and maybe it's a Benton question, I'm not sure. If the city were to increase the amount of ARPA funds to the nonprofit, HopeLink, and those funds were not expended in Issaquah, what is the process if it's already been allocated or allocated for HopeLink and rental systems? What would the process be?
What I can begin by saying is we've had this experience as kind of the CARES funds were coming down from the various cities, and we were watching the ebb and flow of those spend downs, and we did successfully spend everything down. And we do commit to adapting where we can. However, if that should not occur, we have our finance team and we track our spending, weekly at this point, as well as monthly and quarterly. We'll be sharing those reports with the city, with the number of people that we serve. And if we get towards the end of the term of the contract and have concerns, we would be in conversation with the city to say, what are our options, and giving adequate preemptive notice that we see these obstacles to the spend down, and this is what we've tried to do to overcome it, and this is where we're at, so that hopefully you have a lot of flexibility with considering other options.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much, Lucy. Benton or Monica, in your understanding of the ARPA interpretations of the rules as they exist today, is there the chance that there is the possibility for the agency to be able to not only identify that not all the funds were spent, but allow them to come back to Issaquah to be repurposed?
Yeah, in fact, yeah, sorry, Monica. In fact, I believe that would actually be required of us to monitor that they expended them all properly. So
that is great. Monica?
And I just wanted to add that by default, all of our city contracts with all of our nonprofits are on a reimbursement model, which means that the agency first needs to spend the money and then they request a reimbursement from us. So again, like Lucy mentioned, if they notice that they don't have the request, then they would just not reimburse us for that money, and then we would reallocate that and put it back in the budget.
Thank you for clarifying that for everyone. It looks like we have a question from Deputy Council President Ray.
Actually, I have a couple of questions. One of them is, I think for Monica, how did we arrive at the $300,000 number initially? And then my second question is sort of more of a kind of a process question, which is, if we were to spend down the $300,000, would there be any barriers to us putting together another tranche of funding from the ARPA funds at some future date? So.
Thank you, Deputy Council President, for those questions. I think I'm going to start with answering the second question first, because I think for the second question, we are only limited by, I believe, the dates that council meetings happen. So I think especially if we have now already a proposal, putting together another proposal would not be difficult. We would just need to get on the council calendar, just knowing that perhaps a week or two in advance notice we would need, and then another couple of weeks for contract amendments. So kind of like we would need to keep an eye on things and plan for a month ahead. In terms of how we came up with the $300,000, really that was a difficult, and I think it was more of a, on one end, internal conversation with HopeLink. Initial also, first when we reached out to our rental assistance providers, because we really reached out to all three, HopeLink, Issaquah Community Services, and St. Vincent. And we also tried to kind of like gauge their capacity and what can they take on and what makes sense. So also looking at what's available out. So really, I don't think that it was a magic formula. It was more of like what makes sense based on what we know at this time, and knowing that, we also want to save some of the resources for later. So I'm sorry if I disappoint you with the answer, but it's a little bit of that.
No, but can you talk a little bit about the capacity that when you talk to our partners and about their capacity and kind of what the discussion sounded like there and how that influenced, our decision making?
Yes. So on one end, I want to say that actually the other two agencies would have some capacity to take on some dollars. That would be perhaps, let's say, around $50,000 per agency, up to 75. The challenge with those agencies are that they are 100% volunteer-based organizations, so they don't have any paid staff. Everything is done by big-hearted volunteers, and so then that added the challenge to ARPA funding. Because these are federal dollars and any agency that we would contract with would become a subrecipient, they would basically sign their life away and have to have all the requirements that we have as a city, from Title VI mandates and requirements to all the labor laws and all of the things that when you are just a volunteer-based organization, it's just not fair to add that burden to them. So I think that's kind of like that was our discussion and conversation with them. And then HopeLink has proven record for many, many years in handling federal contracts. And so it was kind of like a nice conversation that, like they said, Lucy mentioned, they can take on things, but at the same time on their end too, they will have, I'm sure, a limit where they feel like they're going to have to hire new staff if there's a certain amount allocated. So does that help a little bit more?
Oh, no, this is great. And now I have a question for Lucy, and I love HopeLink. I think they're an amazing organization, so great to partner with them. But what's the impact to HopeLink of a larger sum and potentially a faster, I don't know, depletion rate? I don't know what the impact on you and your team would be.
Yeah, essentially, I would say we're somewhat already prepared. A lot of the changes that we've put in place over these past several months have been to address capacity, because that has been our limit thus far in holding us back from serving more, was just staff capacity. And so we've changed our management structure. We've added a role to just do file compliance and review our files. And then we have new team members coming on as well. And so at this point, additional funding would just mean we would add an additional team member. I will say one thing to note is that our new team members who are coming on, it is a 1-year contract, because these ARPA funds and COVID funds are limited. And so we're bringing on temporary team members. And that allows us to have a level of flexibility as well. So at this point, I really think it comes down to just the specialists to do the work, and our infrastructure is kind of that's been the work of the past several months, and we're ready to go with that.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments before we vote on the amendment? I'll keep an eye on the chat. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Hall. I just wanted to say, thanks to Monica and to Benton and to many others, I'm sure, that worked on collecting data and worked on this proposal in this space. We know now that there's a gap in financial supports for Issaquah renters between that 50 to 80% AMI range with unpaid rent due to the COVID-19 crisis. Thankfully, we know renters below 50% AMI are being supported by King County's rental assistance program, but the fact that we know, and there's been updated data even today, that there are over 200 Issaquah units with overdue rent, and approximately 2/3 of that fit into that 50 to 80% AMI space, therefore not qualifying for the King County assistance program. And with updated feedback, like I said, even today from our rental providers, we know that 1.2 million estimate of total overdue rent is actually more like 1.5 to 1.7 million. So I guess I see $300,000 is what made sense when we had that lower estimate for overdue rent. $500,000 seems to be, it's nowhere near the full need of that range, but it's getting much closer. And if HopeLink has the capacity to deliver those dollars, and we're able to do that, and we're able to help meet more people with the services that they need to help keep more people housed in our community, to support more people who've been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. I think it makes sense to support this larger distribution of ARPA funds for rental assistance.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Deputy Council President Ray, it looks like you have an additional question.
I'm just trying to figure this out. Thank you. I think this is maybe Monica and Benton. If we do the additional $200,000, what will we not be able to do? You know, recognizing that all resources are finite, and if they weren't, we would just say yes, let's do it. So what are we not going to do?
You want to go first, Benton, or would you like me to?
Well, and I'm not sure if City Administrator Bobkowitz can maybe speak to the larger picture.
Thank you, Benton. Deputy Council President Way, members of the council, good evening. That's a great question. And I think as we've talked at the beginning of Benton's presentation, we're still in the first steps of our ARPA response. We have 11 million and change that we've received. We are looking to spend 1.25 million in the current budget. We have these requests before you. There's still the lion's share of that money left. So I think, as the mayor has said, as Benton has gone through the history of the last 6 months or so, we're really focused tonight on those immediate needs. That is what this fund is for. That is what the vision of the president and the Congress was, really to take that kind of action. So from the administration standpoint, if the need is there and the council agrees, by all means, let's spend the money. When we come back to you in 2022, kind of turn the page and look at how we build back better, $200,000 or $300,000 in the scope of what will be $6 or $7 million, plus all the other things we're looking to leverage with the capital financing, community task force, other things, I think comes out in the wash. But really what we're most concerned about are those Issaquah residents in need today. That's what ARPA was passed for. And certainly from the administration standpoint, if the council thinks a few $100,000 more will make an immediate impact, then we're all supportive of that, and we'll deal with the balance of those dollars when we talk more next year.
Great.
Thank you, City Administrator. I'm going to go back for a comment to Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall here. Thanks everyone for letting me comment twice. I just had another thought too, and just kind of wanted to come from a place of what I was thinking even last week during our last city council meeting, and then over the weekend. The last city council meeting, I was certainly one of the people to advocate that we be conservative with our ARPA funding allocation because of the Build Back Better agenda, because there are so many different things in the works where those dollars can be used to leverage other priorities in the community. I guess over the weekend, the discovery and thanks again to the staff for providing this data, but the data that we're seeing and the number of people that I didn't realize would not be covered by the King County Rental Assistance Program, to me, is staggering. I assumed that because King County does have a pretty healthy amount of money that they're going to be getting out to rental assistance program. It's taken a while for them to stand up the program, but I'd assumed that would meet the need for all levels of AMI in King County, and we found out this weekend that that's certainly not true here in Issaquah, and there is a large number of Issaquah residents that could fall into housing instability post October 31st. So I think a modest increase of $200,000 to rental assistance program makes sense in that grand scheme of things, but I am certainly still thinking of ARPA allocation funding more broadly and what we can do to build back better, what we can do in larger, potentially capital projects. But I just think that the data that we see now and that has evolved even today should tell us to maybe fund a little bit more in rental assistance. And I appreciate
Thank you,
the
Councilmember
opportunity
Hall.
to do again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I am not seeing anything else, and so I'm going to have the city clerk do a roll call vote on the amendment, which is to change the $300,000 for rental assistance in the proposed AB to $500,000. City clerk?
Starting with Council President Hunt.
Aye.
Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, 0 nays.
So the amendment carries 6-0. Back to the main motion. Are there any additional comments? Did I miss you? No, I got Councilmember Hall. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong list. Any additional comments before we call for the vote on the main motion? So please indicate in the chat. Okay, I am not seeing any, and so I'm going to scroll up and read the main motion.
Mayor?
Authorize the-
Excuse me. This is the clerk here. I just posted the amended motion in the chat, though the verb tense of the first word needs to be modified.
So it's not coming through on the chat yet.
I bet I sent that to someone privately. Let me send it to the group. Give me just a moment here.
Sure, thank you. I was going to fake my way through it and change the tenses myself, but I'm really glad that you did it. Okay. So the main motion is to authorize the allocation of $800,000 of the city's American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funding, as follows. $300,000 for an investment in the state's Small Business Flex Fund, and $500,000 for the creation of an Issaquah rental assistance program, and direct the finance director to include the revenue and related expenditures in a subsequent 2021 budget adjustment. And I'll turn it back over to the city clerk for the roll call vote.
Beginning with Deputy Council President Ray.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh.
Aye.
Councilmember DeMichelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Goodman.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall.
Aye.
And Council President Hunt. Aye. That's 6 ayes, 0 nays.
So the main motion passes 6-0. Thank you all for the great questions and the great conversation. I'll go to the third part of the ask tonight, which was to gain some feedback on the funding of other agencies through the city's allocation of ARPA funds. And I have Councilmember DeMichelle as first, but I wonder, Benton, if you, well, I guess first one I'll go to the council. So you're being asked to provide some feedback. Are you ready to go to feedback, or do you have any additional questions for Benton? So it does look like we have a couple folks with questions. So let's do the questions first. Let's start with Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall here. Quick question. I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Eastside Fire and Rescue has expressed interest in ARPA funding support from the city of Issaquah. Do we know if there's been a direct ask for support in any of your conversations with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District, or are they included on the list simply because they weren't an ARPA eligible recipient?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So Eastside Fire and Rescue has expressed a specific request, but we have yet to initiate conversations with Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District.
And Benton, I'm just going to add in meetings that I've had with Sammamish Plateau Water District, they have not made a specific ask. They have asked whether the city would consider a specific ask. And I saw that city administrator turned his camera on as well. Did you want to add to that one, Wally?
No, ma'am. You've got it.
Okay. Let's see, Deputy Council President Ray with a question.
What is the nature of the ask from Eastside Fire and Rescue? What are they asking for? I can't find it anywhere, so maybe I missed it, but what do they want and why?
Yeah, so the The specific request I think comes from kind of a funding gap in general for them, and the specific way that we would provide support would depend on some ARPA eligibility constraints as well. But the initiation is from kind of that overall funding gap.
And I see Administrator Bobkowitz also has his camera on.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Council President. If you may recall, the City Council received a communication several months back from Eastside Fire and Rescue asking for a specific dollar amount. That was based on additional costs that they had in responding to the pandemic over the course of, I think at that point, it was probably 12 months. We have met with the staff at Eastside Fire and Rescue, taken our knowledge of what is reimbursable under the American Recovery Act, and have found that there's a disconnect between those expenses and what we're hearing from the U.S. Treasury as would be eligible costs for ARPA. So we continue to work with Eastside Fire and Rescue to try to find expenses that they have that would be eligible. And that's, I think, been part of the challenge. So the reason we're bringing up these other agencies tonight is that we really are looking to turn the page on the discussion of how to spend these dollars. We're hoping to make it as clean as possible with the discussion of this evening, but quite frankly, we can't because I think the administration certainly would like to pursue what opportunities there may be with Eastside Fire and Rescue, certainly to continue the conversation with Sammamish Plateau. I know in seeing some questions from Councilmember DeMichelle, she's concerned about the Issaquah School District. Do they have any additional requests? So really this evening, we're not in a position for dollars, but we would like at least to get some feedback from the council. Are these discussions you would like us to continue with? And if so, we'll come back to you probably right at the beginning of 2022 and continue this discussion after we've had an opportunity to talk to the agencies more.
Great, thanks, Wally.
I'm not seeing any more questions, so thank you for that. Let's start with comments and we'll go to Councilmember DeMichelle.
Well, thank you. That was a great segue. So I was in a presentation about a week ago from Superintendent of Schools, Thiele, talking about the funding they did receive. School districts have received federal funding. But as often happens with Issaquah School District and Eastside School Districts, the Issaquah School District received many multiples less than similar sized school districts. And the superintendent used the example and compared the 7 millions, I believe, that they received to the Highline School District, which is a very similarly sized district. And Highline received $126 million. So, and as Superintendent Thiele said, the business expenses, school districts are in the business of education and they are businesses. The business expenses that those two districts had were probably exactly the same because they had to stand up a lot of things during COVID. Now, there's no way, that our ARPA funding can make them whole or even come close. But what I hope would be that we would open up a dialogue with the school district to see if we can identify projects or programs or places where something that would very much benefit the school district would also benefit the residents of Issaquah. And a couple of things that come to mind is the district struggled with broadband. We did too. There might be one place where we could find an overlap or a mutually beneficial project of some kind. And then one of the other urgent concerns that's been identified is mental health services. And the school district already has a way of providing mental health services to a great number of students. Is there a way that we could supplement that program and broaden it to support people in our community? So what I'm just asking is let's open up the dialogue. Let's talk, find out if there are places where we could do something mutually beneficial with the federal funding we have that would help to supplement what the district is facing in terms of challenges. So that's my comment. Thanks Thanks, City Administrator Bob Kowitz, for giving me an intro.
Thank you, Councilmember DeMichelle. So going down the list, I believe it's Deputy Council President Ray, followed by Council President Hunt.
Thank you, Mayor Polly. So I'm not like opposed to doing this. I would want to see one of two things, that there are funding for these non-eligible entities, be it the school district or Eastside Fire and Rescue or Sam Platt, that there was some direct connection between the cost of the service or the cost incurred and people in Issaquah. And if not that, then that there is a consensus amongst all of the partners. You know, Eastside Fire and Rescue has the 5 partners. We're one of 5. Sam Platt touches both City of Sammamish as well as the City of Issaquah, and maybe also parts of unincorporated King County. And so I would want to see the other entities participating in that too. So from my perspective, if not focused on Issaquah, and if everybody doesn't participate, then Issaquah would be in essence subsidizing other cities, other fire districts, other parts of King County, and I don't think that's really a good business for us to be in.
Thank you, Deputy Council President, for that feedback. Council President Hunt?
Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. I was going to say, in response to Councilmember DeMichelle's comments, there is a leadership meeting with the Issaquah School District leadership and the city leadership tomorrow. So we could use that opportunity to discuss. I think part of your comment was to have that discussion. So I would be happy to raise that at that meeting. As far as the and I also, my mind went directly to broadband. So I think that is an area where clearly they have needs that are much larger in terms of funding. So you know, that's not I think a good use of our funds. But I do think where we have mutual where there's a mutual interest and would benefit the public, both from the school district and our side, that could be a useful conversation to have. As far as the other organizations, it's really hard to know without knowing what their ask is. I do think that Council Deputy President Ray brought up a good point, which is these are entities that serve multiple regions or multiple cities, and those cities are likely also receiving recovery funds. So I think that's important to consider as we consider asks from these different agencies, and also the connection to recovery from economic hardship around COVID. But I am also very open to that, and I think one of the points of this ARPA funding is to help recovery across the whole economy and the whole public. And so I think it's important that we consider if there are unmet needs, if those are unmet needs from other organizations. Thanks.
Thank you, Council President Hunt. We have 3 more council members, either wanting to comment or just to confirm what you've heard from other council members that you agree with or don't agree with. So let's do Council Member Walsh, followed by Council Member Hall.
Thank you. I think at this point, having a conversation is great, and understanding the needs of the other organizations that we partner with that did not receive these funds is important. I don't think that speaks anything to our interest to provide that funding or not to provide that funding. It just speaks to a sense of wanting more information and wanting to understand the scope of the challenges, so that when we are making strategic decisions, we can better understand what some of the potential areas of funding are. So that would be my thought.
Thank you, Councilmember Walsh. Councilmember Hall with a question and a comment.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Hall. A clarifying question. Did I hear correctly that administration would come back early next year after this discussion, so early 2022, with updated information on what those agency asks would be and then also recommendations on that? Was that right, City Administrator Bobkowitz?
Yes, Councilmember Hall, members of the council, that's our current plan.
Okay. Then I guess my comment is, yeah, I'm happy moving forward with collecting more information. By then, we will also have, I think, recommendations from the Capital Finance Community Task Force to consider as well, and they may advocate that some of those funds be used for capital needs in the city as well. So I think as long as we're getting all that information together and we'll be able to kind of see it side by side, we'll have the information we need to make the best decision with those dollars.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Councilmember Goodman, do you have anything to add?
Councilmember Goodman here. Nope. I don't disagree with any of the comments. I don't have anything interesting to add. So thanks for all the comments.
Thank you. Benton, and I'm assuming you have everything you need to move forward.
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for all the presentation this evening and bringing along your guests. That was much appreciated. So we have completed our work on AB 8254. Thank you for all the information. And we are going to good of the order, and I will keep an eye on the chat to see if any council members have something to bring up for good of the order. And Councilmember Goodman, did I miss something from you?
No, you did not.
Okay, thanks. Hard to see with the script and everything all over the page. So as I look to see if councils have anything, I will go through some upcoming council meetings. There's a city council study session for Tuesday, October 26th with potential agenda items including the 2022 legislative agenda, the 2022 budget deliberations, and the November 1st regular council meeting. The potential agenda items include performance measurements and 3 items related to the proposed 2022 budget revenue sources. Number 1 is the proposed levy. Number 2 is amending community planning and development fees. And number 3 is utility tax for Sammamish Plateau Water District customers. And I see Councilmember DeMichelle has something for good of the order.
Just very quickly, Saturday morning, I attended the virtual open house that Sound Transit put on for the Link Light Rail. It was a really, really good session. I believe there's going to be another one on Wednesday, but if you can't make either of those, there is a survey online and I would urge everybody to take it. And I'll try to send you the links to both of those things so that if you want to take advantage of them, you can. It was really a really good session. So I would urge you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No other items. The last thing on our agenda this evening is an executive session. And as earlier announced, there will be a session held this evening to discuss the performance of a public employee for RCW 42.30.110(1)(G). And the item is expected to last 15 minutes. There is not any action anticipated to follow in the open session. So just as a reminder, executive sessions are closed to the public, and we will now recess into executive session at 9:47 p.m. I'm asking the city clerk to move the city council into a separate session within this meeting, and anyone who's not part of the closed session will remain in the main meeting. You are welcome to stay in the meeting until it is reconvened. City clerk.